This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Hi, Lance.
What is happening, Todd?
Not much,
Right
man.
into it, man.
Lance Lambert, BovedaInc.com. Where are you?
I am sitting in the Centurion Lounge in SeaTac, Seattle, Washington.
Oh, yeah. And where are you going?
So actually on my way back down from ICBC in Vancouver to Hall of Flowers in Santa Rosa, which is in Northern California. So very much looking forward to these two back-to-back shows here.
How is Vancouver?
Oh, my gosh, it's phenomenal, man. And you'll never guess who sat right next to me as I moderated the Strategic Partnership panel. But Darren from Namaste.
Darren Gill, nice guy. He's all business, that guy, too, isn't he?
Oh, my gosh. He is all business, and the way he articulates and delivers his messaging, very smart guy. And, everyone on the panel was fantastic. We had everything from John Sally, former basketball player's daughter, this young 22-year-old entrepreneur in the industry, already cross-licensed in multiple states, to the head, Emmanuel, the head of Hemp Media, which is the largest cannabis hemp media out of Germany, Charles, lawyer out of Denver. I mean, we had all these great guys. But, man, the focus kept coming back on Darren, specifically also because of the fact that he is from Canada. Everyone else was either from Europe or from the U.S. So a lot of the questions were being drilled down a little more specific to how things are going in Canada. So he did a phenomenal job, man. Great guy.
What's the climate like in terms of two things? One, how the rollout's been, and then secondly, how the stock market's performing?
Gosh, the rollout has been a bit of a challenge. I know we discussed that, but it's another thing to get at an event on the ground in Canada to hear about the latest things going on. And it's definitely been a bit of a challenge. One thing I have gotten from the front line is frustration in the fact that you have, dozens, if not now up to hundreds of dispensaries that are being closed, but there's not enough legitimate dispensaries in order to offset the demand. So it's forcing a very interesting scenario, even getting into a microclimate like Vancouver Island is a good example, where now I believe they're down to maybe 2 legitimate dispensaries open on the island, which is forcing quite a bit of individuals, including specifically medical patients, to turn back to the black market. And that's something that's hard for us to swallow because we wanted everything to move forward in the right way and the right fashion. But, politics and due process kind of takes the best of any situation at times.
Is there still optimism, when you're in Vancouver? Is there optimism just for that things will kind of improve, black market will diminish, that rollouts like edibles and stuff will be a bit smoother, and there's sort of hopefully more product down the line? And then, is there, are people optimistic? Because everyone I talk to at cannabis right now is like, but I still think I look at a lot of really good companies and think, there's good opportunities for stocks. I really believe bottom's pretty soon.
No, I definitely agree with you. I'd say the overall energy was positive. People were still looking forward to celebrating and conversation at the networking events and after hours, overall upbeat. And, I ran into a handful of gentlemen that they're actually their forte and background is Blackberry Farms and doing commercial construction. And these guys were all excited about how they've gotten licensed, and they're going to be putting up what's starting out with a 70,000 square foot operation out on the island. And they're very optimistic and looking forward to things to come. So talking about these people that have that energy that was so predominant in years past, right? It still very much exists. But one thing that I think a lot of individuals were also having an epiphany of during the event was that, there was folks there from Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, South Africa. There's folks there from Germany, from Netherlands, Luxembourg, Ireland, England. And they were all really looking at Canada and seeing what's been going right and what hasn't been going so right in the rollout of legalization from an adult use perspective. So I think that was kind of interesting in how people realized, wow, we almost are a bit of a test model, if you will, for the entire world, not just for North America. And that's spot on. So that brought a different dynamic to conversation around where the industry is right now and what's going right.
Yeah, they're looking at us going, hey, how'd you guys F up? We don't want to do that. That's let's be honest. And that's what's going on. I've always thought of Canada as a guinea pig sample to this, too. I don't even think just a guinea pig in terms of I get a little deeper with this stuff, though, but I think we're a guinea pig, too, as a successful nation to see, A, how will the businesses succeed? What will they do? How will the rollouts occur? But also, what will the impact, what will the societal impacts be? What, how will ending the stigma go? How will demographics, the senior demographics accept this stuff? How will big business, how will pharma start to accept this stuff? So I think I think there was a bigger plan to look at Canada. I really firmly believe that. And hopefully as we roll out in other countries now, people take the best of what we've done well and then, take some of the bad and turn that into better.
Yeah, I totally agree on that premise. I mean, that's one thing that one of the individuals shared, that there were actually 5 PMs, prime ministers from Europe, that were out touring Canada and seeing what's going on and seeing what's going right and getting those honest responses on what things could be improved on or what they might do different. Again, a lot of us in the industry applaud Canada for being aggressive and going, hey, we're going to start with flower and then we'll roll into the concentrates. We'll make sure everyone's comfortable with the basic element of the plant, and then we'll move forward and see how things go. But you're right, it was a bit of a social experiment too. It was the same thing that I'm not a big fan of him, but the governor at the time in Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper, who's now running for president and saying how he's pro-cannabis. Honestly, he wasn't really pro-cannabis in the beginning. He was pro-money. But, it's one thing he was telling other states when Denver came online for adult use in 2014 is, this is just as much a social experiment as it is anything else. And you do have to factor those things. How are different generations with different stigmas going to adapt to something that was so taboo just 10 years ago, 15 years ago? So it's quite interesting.
Lance Lambert from Boveda.com. So you're sitting in an airport right now.
I'm sitting in an airport, and luckily most people have their headphones on.
Yeah, I was going to say, aren't you afraid in America to talk even about cannabis in airports?
Man, not anymore. I end up getting more questions than comments or snares. That's for sure.
Oh, good to know. So we heard Bernie Sanders a few weeks ago on Joe Rogan's podcast saying if he was ever president, I would legalize marijuana.
Oh, yes.
He won't be president, in my opinion, but that's. I don't think he'll win out of that bunch. But I ask you every week, is there anything going to Senate? Is there anything going to House committees to start pushing some bills through?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I mean, there's a list. I got to give props to my friend Tom Angel, former writer for me at marijuana.com. He's got a newsletter he pushes out every day, and he's tracking over 1,000 bills and regulations and adjustments and rules, all of these things that tie back to D.C. Finally, I'm very happy to report that the Safe Banking Act is getting momentum, and there was a meeting that occurred last week. Unfortunately, only a few of the Republican Party came out. There are several representatives that are in support of the Safe Banking Act from the Democratic side of the fence, but we're definitely moving in the right direction, and something could come into fruition within the next several months. And that's a huge win for all of us, even for those of us that don't touch the plant, right? It's one thing I've shared is just the fact that we work with businesses that generate money off of the plant. That's still a bit of a concern for publicly traded banks that are under the FDIC program in the U.S. So it kind of becomes a hassle, even for the guy that's just making rolling papers, because he has to look over his shoulder and try to figure out how to do his banking without getting his account shut down with a 30, 60, 90-day notice like they do so often with people in this industry. So the Safe Banking Act is moving in an awesome way, and we're very excited about that one.
Lance, Trump is so unpredictable. We saw him sort of go out about the vaping and the concerns with vaping based on a few deaths and stuff. And then I read online that maybe he was going to really go at vaping to make sure that there's some sort of much more stringent system into all things, even cannabis, like where it's almost setting up that, hey, this type of vaping is bad, but by the way, here's legitimate companies doing things right. And here's, when cannabis is there and, it's not certain types of vaping. Do you think he's getting any closer to maybe shocking the world and saying that let's do this?
I don't, one thing, Todd, I won't forget, because you're one of the first friends to comment that he'd be likely to really run with that when trying to go for his second round in office. And I don't discount that at all, especially with the rumors coming out of Friends Underground in D.C. saying that federal legalization is inevitably going to happen by 2022. We've seen a lot of people from the public sector segue into the private sector, specifically into cannabis, whether it's Boehner on a board of a company or whatever the case may be. I think he's getting a little bit closer. I think one thing that really stood out to me a few weeks ago is he kind of came back to saying that it's up to the states. He said that when he was trying to get elected into the office, and he finally said it again, which is good to know because we still have, a DA that still is not as throwback as the 80s like his predecessor, but still is very conservative in respect to cannabis. But this, you touched on something that is I would say kind of bordering on an epidemic right now with the vaping, and it is more centric to obviously the nicotine side, but there are unfortunately cases tied to the black market where they're cutting oil with a thickener, essentially. Vitamin E is, as far as we know, is the biggest culprit that's being utilized, which is not approved for inhalation, nor is coconut oil or PPG or PEG, any other agent that's used to thin or thicken. But it's scary, man. There's now been 7 deaths as of this morning related to this vaping epidemic, and that's a big deal. I mean, it just came on the scene, but there's hundreds and hundreds that have subsequently had lung damage or been hospitalized in lieu of this outbreak. So I'm glad that Trump is speaking to it. Someone else where it's a hot topic, and I mean, this actually goes back a year ago. I remember being in London, and the Parliament is doing the same thing over there, taking vaping very serious. They did studies that showed it is a safer alternative than traditional smoking of cigarettes, and the nicotine's fractional. It's maybe 10% of nicotine compared to a conventional cigarette, but they're still saying the epidemic with respect to usage for underage teens, which is true. I mean, that's true in North America and Canada and U.S., Mexico, and obviously over there in the UK as well. So that's a kind of bigger picture, overarching picture to what's going on with vaping, I think, right now.
Yeah, and I know that from friends of mine who have kids now that are 13, 14 and stuff, and would say, man, I can't believe this. Like, the kids are smoking, they're all vaping. And, I think back, I probably smoked cigarettes at 15, 16. I smoked a couple of joints at 16, 17. But I think the difference was we sort of experimented things then. And they were kind of like,
exactly.
I just remember cigarettes, you were like, oh, they're gross. Most guys are like, they're gross. And maybe you took it up when you started getting stress in college and things and smoked too much and regret it. Yeah. But the vaping, I don't think you ever have that feeling that, when you're a young kid, you just go, I don't think you, as a young kid, you would go, oh, this is gross. I remember thinking that about cigarettes. I don't think if I was a 15-year-old and someone had a vape around me that I would think that.
I agree. I hate to say it, but I think vaping's almost getting a bit of a stereotype all the way back to the Gable, like the silver screen days back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, where it's actually cool, all the way up into the 60s, where it's still looked at as something that the cool kids did. And unfortunately, that is, I think, the mentality that's coming about with vaping, and that's not okay. And the reason why I believe people play it down is, it's just vapor. It's just moisture, and that's not the case. It's a different type of vapor. You're talking about, again, artificial elements like polyethylene glycol that you're inhaling into your lungs, and we really aren't meant to inhale anything at the end of the day into our lungs. That's why a lot of us medical advocates in the cannabis space are very pro tinctures, topicals, transdermals, edibles. Because the toughest system for processing things is really our GI tract. I mean, just the other elements above and beyond the GI tract itself. The gallbladder, your kidney, your liver. It's easier to digest things versus inhaling. It's just safer.
Also, I think that people should do the research on what vapes are not black market vapes, on vapes that have some sort of different technology based in them. And, if you're going to vape, I think that there's ones, and, they would be with publicly traded companies that have full disclosure on this type of stuff. You just want to do your research on it. And for me, I think if anyone wants to vape, man, let them vape, to be honest, because I hate smokers. I really do. And by the way, I still have the odd cigarette or two, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but that is true. I had a few this summer, and I hadn't had them in a couple of years. But definitely when it comes to the underage vaping, that's the stuff I always say you got to get a hold of. That to me is where, where you got to draw the line. You got to make sure that you're not appealing to minors. If you're appealing to anyone who can make their decision as an adult, well, then let them vape, man. Especially if they're not smoking. Yeah. That's my opinion on it. But please, these flavored things for, just if your kid's vaping, you got to have a serious talk with them. And by the way, parents, if you're listening, because I am talking to a lot of parents right now with kids who are 12, 13, 14, have a talk with them and ask them honestly, hey, you vaping? And they'll be like, yeah. And they'll just say, listen, you shouldn't be vaping. Like, you're not an adult. That's it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly true. And another thing, and this is something that obviously reinforces the whole legal market on the cannabis side. Do not buy black market. Do not buy, even if it is a brand name you recognize. This is the problem is there's a lot of copycats out there in the market, and that's the few cases that were tied to cannabis, not to nicotine vaping. They were tied a lot of times to these brands that were just black market knockoffs of legitimate brands from legitimate states, all the way down to the rule and regulation signage and stamps that are on it to make people think that it's a legitimate product. Make sure you do your homework and don't get it secondhand. Get it from a legitimate, legal, licensed dispensary, no matter if it's Canada or the U.S.
Yeah, and I know a few, but I'm always careful what I say because I don't want to sound promotional, right? But I just know that there's more technology into some. And I just think people should look in like a dab tab or something, like look into some of the technologies that are out there and do your due diligence before you just go and buy this thing that's like handed to you at a club one night. Like, there was so much of that going on for a few years. It's just like people come and buy. And I found it really, I always find hypocrisy and everything weird because if someone just gave you weird stuff on the street, I don't think you would be like, where'd this come from? But, a couple drinks in at a club. Anyway, we're getting off topic here. But, just.
No, I know, but it's true.
There's great products out there if you're into that sort of thing, I would say. I would just say that you got to do your homework on what they are. Lance Lambert from BovedaInc.com and headed now. So where are you headed now?
So I'm heading down to Hall of Flowers, which this is their third event. This is kind of new to the industry, but has made a huge splash, a big B2B event that's right at the gateway to the Triangle of Northern California in a little city called Santa Rosa. And you get some of the top brands. I mean, Papa and Barkley and Cookies and Sonoma Pacific and just all PAX, all these big names that come out. And it's really for the producers and for the manufacturers to connect with the retailers and the buyers. So it's kind of the seller meets the buyer type of scenario. A lot of new products are launched at this event and a lot of people. I mean, I'll definitely be posting up quite a few pictures of brands and people I see because it's one of those, if you're going to be at the show.
Yeah, and we're seeing are you seeing a lot more, we got about 3-4 minutes here, Lance. Are you seeing a lot more, and at least I am anyway, like influencer support? Like I saw like a company like Halo Labs working with Kaliva, who's working with Jay-Z as their brand strategist. Like, are you seeing a lot of that happen now in the cannabis industry? John Legend, I think, had a thing today that came out.
Yeah, it's crazy. Jay-Z, I mean, there's all kinds of people getting into specifically the CBD side of the industry. They feel a little bit safer on that side.
Yeah.
But more and more, from a cultural standpoint, you are seeing a lot of celebrities and musicians get into it. The thing for me, again, I don't mean to be biased or knock anyone, but just keep in mind, a lot of the people that are getting into this industry, they're simply white labeling someone else's product. So like we talked about with vaping, do your homework and see where the flower or that core product is really being sourced, because chances are it isn't being produced by that actual entity that's promoting it with that individual's name. And we won't say any. I mean, there's plenty of celebrities that we could throw out that have their brands out there, and I'm friends with some of them. But I also know who's growing their flower or who's producing their oil, and some of them I trust more so than others because I know what's in that end product.
In 10 seconds or less, Lance, would you say just like homegrown stuff more, that's a little more moderated and stuff?
With the home grows, people are passionate. This plant, it's so ironic. It's called a weed.
No, I mean home in America, like America home.
Oh, yeah, for home, yeah, definitely. The people have it right here. I mean, everyone's so compliant. If you're buying legitimate cannabis, they're going to be tested for heavy metals. They're going to be tested for herbicides, pesticides, you name it. So definitely. I mean, don't go black market. Definitely support the legal market so you know what you're getting. That's the big win.
Yeah, I think that's an important message. I really do. Here in Canada, especially, where 70% of the really illegal market still exists, and it's a lot of organized crime that you're supporting too. Now I'm looking over my shoulder. Okay, thanks, Lance, dude. I appreciate that. BovedaInc.com. Now, you guys don't touch the plant, but you keep it very, very fresh. We do appreciate your time.
You got it.
Okay, cheers.
Yep, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
See you, man. BovedaInc.com.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.